I do think that it doesn't mean they're going to win the Super Bowl. I'd love to just ball up a fist and say, damn it, yes, guaranteed they're going to win a Super Bowl, but they got to build a Jim Leonard defense. They've got to find a weapon at wide receiver. I do think they're absolutely better, though, with Joe Brady as their head coach.
It's time now for the Nuff Said with Bob Koshinski podcast. Brought to you by Chef's Famous Italian Restaurant, home to spaghetti parm, and Rich Entertainment. They bring friends and family together through unforgettable experiences. And the Big Weck Radio, home to the oldies. Bob's guest on this episode is Tyler Dunne, prominent independent NFL journalist and owner of the Go Long website and platform.
Welcome back. Another episode of Nuff Said with yours truly. I'm really excited about this one. I'll tell you in just a second. We want to give a shout out to Chef's Famous Italian Restaurant, and we're heading into Lent. Today is Punchki Day, which if you're Polish, you know that means fat donuts. It's also Mardi Gras. It's Fat Tuesday. I don't need an excuse to eat either pasta or the donuts. And tomorrow is Ash Wednesday. And here at Chef's, their special tomorrow will be linguine and white clam sauce, one of my favorites. And we want to give a shout out to the Big Weck, my favorite radio station. I just love the oldies, and I want to thank Buddy Schul out there for supporting us. And of course, Rich Entertainment. And we'll hear from Rich Entertainment in just a few minutes. And the bison season just a couple months away, so don't forget. But right now, in our French Connection studios, a guy, Tyler Dunne, who this is my very first opportunity to meet Tyler. And Tyler made all kind of waves a couple years ago, which we're going to get into. But first, Tyler, you cover the Bills extensively, and you cover them when Sean McDermott was let go. You were on every national show that could grab you. I mean, everybody wanted to get a piece of what you knew. And I guess I was a little surprised because you were not surprised that McDermott got fired.
No, Bob, they're not surprised at all. And thanks for having me. I'm glad we made it happen, right? We were going to do this earlier, and there was, snowstorms, and then Joe Brady gets hired, but no excuses.
And I've
got to make it happen.
Cutting down trees today with this.
That's right. We live down in the southern tier. You got to cut down the trees and get the winter's meat. That's right. Hunting down some moose. But honestly, I was not surprised. Now, it's crazy how the NFL works. It is one on the fringes that Brandon Cooks play. If that's ruled a catch, they get to the AFC Championship game. They get to a Super Bowl. Holy hell, is this a different conversation right now? We could be discussing the Buffalo Bills as Super Bowl champs, Super Bowl participants with the way Seattle played. But alas, that's how the NFL playoffs go. I mean, it is decided by a play here, a play there. But yeah, as the season was kind of grinding along, and there were ups, there were downs, and I think we all kind of heard what was said at press conferences from Sean McDermott. He knew what he was saying, referencing Jacoby Myers a few times. So that's what we hear and what we see. But also, I'm always talking to people in the building, around the team, and I could sense that things weren't as rosy as they might have appeared. Between that, we always talk about it at Go Along, the core four, ownership, GM, head coach, quarterback. That's got to be aligned. If that's not aligned, you're never going to win a Super Bowl, even if it's just a little off. So, had heard that 9 years is a long time for a GM and a head coach to be together. Me and my college roommate at Syracuse, I always use this example, Jimmy Paul. He's one of my best friends to this day. We talk all the time. We wanted to kill each other, and we lived together for 2 years. So 9 years is a long time for Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane to be together. And I had heard that maybe that relationship wasn't as great as everybody kind of assumed. And then also there's the relationship between Sean McDermott and Josh Allen. And I think it improved at the end. We all saw the Snow Angels on ESPN with Scott Van Pelt. But I think at the very end, I'm sure we'll get into it, Sean McDermott tried to evolve, tried to change, tried to work on that relationship a little bit, but their personalities are completely different. I don't think this is an Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes kind of setup. And, are they in the weight room, wrestling and fighting? Is it toxic? No. Is it great? Not exactly. So you start hearing these things. They don't go away. 13 seconds was even coming up a few times. I just got the sense that anything short of getting to the Super Bowl and Terry Pegula and the Bills would move on and do something different.
So you think even if they had beaten Denver but lost to New England, he would have lost his job?
It's always how it looks, how it goes down. But yeah, I think so. I think that when you look throughout history too, it's not abnormal. We're all in our Buffalo bubble here. And maybe you caught it yourself on local TV, but my gosh, Sean McDermott is fired, and there's a station talking to sports psychologists about how the players are going to cope with this all. There's ice sculptures being built. There's petitions making the rounds. If you're here in Buffalo, and I think there's something to be said for Sean McDermott was in everybody's ear for a long time. You hear him on local radio. Look, you see him on local TV. His press conferences are multiple times a week. He becomes a staple in people's lives.
Yeah, people grew up with him.
Right.
Literally, teenagers grew up with Sean McDermott.
You're right, Bob. I mean, close to a decade.
Yeah.
And so when he's after a brutal playoff loss and everybody's pissed and everybody wants to just scream at the top of their lungs locally, and Sean McDermott's there saying he's standing up for Buffalo, damn it. Like, there is a visceral connection between the locals and the coach. And I'm sure Sean McDermott kind of knew that maybe he would get fired,
Trouble, yeah.
and he could be in trouble. And it's true emotion too at the same time. So fans, locals, they hear that, they feel a connection with them. He's let go. You don't hear from Terry Pegula. You don't really hear from Brandon Beane that much. That connection isn't there subconsciously for fans. So anyways, he's fired. He's let go. And people are upset. But if you kind of get outside of the Buffalo bubble, you see this isn't abnormal. I mean, teams almost always move on from head coaches if you don't get to a Super Bowl, if you don't win the big one. Tom Landry and Bill Cowher are the only head coaches, and Hank Stram, although he won an AFL title before he got a Super Bowl, but who have won a Super Bowl with their first team in year 9 or beyond, right? The list of the Wayne Fonces and the Marvin Lewises and the Don Coryells and the Bart Starrs and the Marty Schottenheimers, that group is much, much larger. So I don't think it was out of the realm of possibility.
Well, let me ask you this. So, I mean, Beane and McDermott didn't do anything unless it came from Carolina. I mean, it just drove me crazy that how many players they brought in, how many front office guys. But he was there with Cam Newton. Cam Newton was the prototype for Josh Allen. He had to know. I mean, Cam Newton was the Carolina Panthers. They weren't going to the Super Bowl without Cam Newton. How did he not understand that he had his version of Cam Newton in his own building?
I'm really glad you brought that up, Bob, because that kind of gets to the crux of this all. I don't think that Sean McDermott ever realized until it was too late that the Buffalo Bills need to flow through their transcendent MVP level quarterback. Like, he really believed that it goes through him. He's the head coach. He ended the drought. When I sat down in his office ahead of the playoffs in 2024, he brought up ending the drought several times, which is his right. I mean, that was a big deal. You had grown adults crying their eyes out when Tyler Boyd caught that pass on 4th down for Cincinnati. It was a big deal. But at some point, the calculus changes. Like, okay, you end the drought, you get to the playoffs, that's great. You draft a quarterback, and around, I'd say 2020, the COVID year, when Allen's second MVP voting, and then at the latest 2021 with 13 seconds, right, and now he's on this all-time heater at the quarterback position, you've got to realize that Sean McDermott, who is buttering the bread here? It is Josh Allen, and he could never get to that place. They came up with a lot of sources, after he was fired too, who said that all of our reporting in 2023 was spot on, and that Sean McDermott just couldn't really realize that he's got to work on that relationship with Josh Allen. Whether it's the way he coaches or how the team is built, things got to kind of revolve around 17. He couldn't get to that place until it was too late. And Cam Newton, it's funny you bring him up. It blew people's minds on the coaching staff how Sean McDermott in meetings would just, quote unquote, mother F Cam Newton as the reason the Panthers didn't win a Super Bowl. Okay, he didn't jump on that fumble against Denver. Brutal performance in Santa Clara 10 years ago. That 2015 season, one of the best seasons we've ever seen at the quarterback position. And as you said, that's the reason people are getting promoted and getting jobs. Like, there are only 5-6 Josh Allens on the planet. There are a lot more Sean McDermotts.
So we're going to get back to Sean McDermott. And before we go any farther, I want you to plug your Go Long, because for people who aren't aware of what you've done, you've reinvented yourself since, you worked for the Buffalo News. You were elsewhere before you worked for the News. Then you worked for Bleacher Report. Then you worked for, the Bleacher Report laid you off, right?
Right. So graduated Syracuse and was at the Buffalo News in like a hybrid role, Fayetteville Observer.
Yeah.
And then really my first big full-time job was covering the Green Bay Packers at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel for 5 years, and then came back to the Buffalo News, covered the Rex Ryan Bills, which I'm sure Tim and Jonah and everybody you've had on who's been around that team, we're all pissed we didn't write a book about the 2015 Bills. You didn't know what the hell was going to happen day in and day out. And to Sean McDermott's credit, he cleaned that all up. I was at the Buffalo News and went to Bleacher Report, did NFL features for, I think it was like 4.5 years. And then they just got rid of all the writers, one fell swoop. And I basically said, all right, you know what? These corporations are kind of changing their vision on a dime. I'd rather just cover pro football the way I want to, long form, and do it independently. If people want to subscribe, great. If I write stuff worth busting out the credit card and punching in those digits, great. If not, I guess I'll find something else to do. And we've been going strong. Yeah.
I'm a subscriber.
Great to have you. Thank you.
Of course, I expect a free subscription after today's episode. So you reinvented yourself, and things are working out great. And that leads me talking about sponsors. I want to have to give a break now to one of our sponsors, Rich Entertainment. Let's hear more about them.
At Rich Entertainment Group, their mission is simple: bringing friends and families together through unforgettable experiences. From live sports and theater productions to luxury travel and hospitality, they're creating moments that people truly remember. With 19 businesses and growing, Rich Entertainment Group isn't just a group of companies. It's a community built around connection, joy, and shared experiences. It's all about bringing people together, and honestly, that's something we can all use a little more of.
Rich Entertainment, and of course, the Buffalo Bisons are one of their enterprises. We'll be hearing much more about that. So Tyler Dunne, our guest, Go Long, and that basically represents what you do. You write these long, lengthy articles. The people like myself who grew up reading lengthy, long art, and I got to tell you, I'm a fan because, I grew up and I got to know really well guys like Larry Felser and Jim Kelly, the hockey writer. These guys were great journalists. They could afford, the paper would allow them to do multi-part series. They didn't quite jump off the deep end as much as you did on the McDermott story, which we'll get to. But, you have all the sources. You're able to figure out what's what. So explain to me in your mind, why should, under Brandon Beane's now total leadership, should we expect Joe Brady to take it any farther than Sean McDermott did?
And you know what, Joe Brady, walking into this job, I think he does grasp that reality that he's inheriting. Like, it is Super Bowl or bust.
Yes, exactly.
You have to kind of just give it a big old bear hug and realize that's the existence here, because Sean McDermott, for most of a decade, had this team in the playoffs, win the division, on the cusp, couldn't get it done. And I think what gives you hope, okay, there's everything we see. And what we see is a defensive coach whose defense just could not get it done, to put it mildly. I usually had those stats right at the tip of my tongue, but the non-kneel down drives in the last 6 of 8 playoff losses are brutal. They've given up more points per drive than the 2007 Patriots scored per drive, with Brady and Welker and Moss and, a team that almost went undefeated. So historic stuff. Meltdown after meltdown after meltdown. So like that's what we see. Or you've got to kind of move on from that. Something's got to change.
Right.
Last offseason, they signed a bunch of defensive guys. They drafted a bunch of defensive guys. Brandon Beane basically saying, all right, here are more options. Now, injuries played a big part, obviously, and some of those additions didn't work out. But it ended in similar fashion, the 3rd and 11 to Cortland Sutton. You're showing pressure. You're showing blitz. It's going to be different this time, Bob. And then you back off. And Bo Nix has time. And he completes a pass. And then what happened when Tre'Davious White gets injured? Dane Jackson comes in. Sean Payton realizes it. They go right after the replacement. Basic coaching stuff that we've seen year in and year out. That's what we see. What we don't see, I think, is what Joe Brady did discuss a lot of that too, right? More disguise, more deception, putting heat on the coordinator, not just the quarterback, because that headset shuts off at 15 seconds. He wants them swearing in that up in the booth, the coordinators. There wasn't a lot of that out of the opponents for Buffalo. So that's just the tangible stuff. But what we don't see are the relationships behind the scenes. And I think that, he did a great job of building a program. They needed to pendulum swing away from Rex Ryan, clean up the building. But I was told this again when they fired Sean McDermott, that he tends to grind on people. He walks into a room. I'm not just talking players. I mean, there's coaches, there's trainers, there's administrators. There's a lot of people that make the thing go at One Bills Drive. Kind of walks into a room and there's just a certain negative energy that people feel. It's the opposite with Joe Brady. I mean, this is a guy in his 30s, drinking way too many fast twitch Gatorades, like you said, all hyped up, walking into the building in shorts. All that stuff is real. He has built genuine relationships with players, most notably Josh Allen. There's a reason that he brought up Josh Allen and the love for Josh Allen as many times as he did in his introductory press conference, because it wasn't necessarily there before. Now, this isn't anything new. You see this throughout the NFL. You have one coach who coaches a certain way. It doesn't work out. You usually swing away to somebody completely different in personality. So even though Joe Brady isn't an internal hire, quotation marks, I think he is the exact opposite of Sean McDermott in a lot of ways. And he's been in the building, so he kind of knows what has worked. And look, a lot has worked for this team. They've been a perennial contender. And I think he knows a lot of the stuff that needs to change. I mean, you saw the NFLPA stuff come out this week on, practice habits and the trainers and how players deal with injuries. It hasn't been pretty for the Buffalo Bills. Joe Brady has seen all that. He talked about sports science stuff in his interview.
Well, so I'm going way back here. So when I was at the Empire Sports Network, which we were talking about before we came on, I became the general manager after being there for 7 years. So all these people who were my buddies and coworkers, and suddenly I was the boss. There's a transition there that's not easy. Mm-hmm. Joe Brady, who was buddies with a lot of guys, especially on the offensive side, and I'm sure many times players weren't sure if a decision had been made whether Brady had anything to do with it or not. But now for sure that he does. The buck stops with Joe Brady. And I guess Brandon Beane, too, has a say, though I don't know how much he really wants to get involved. I think that's a recipe for disaster if Beane starts getting involved with the actual football decisions, because that's not where he actually comes from.
You know what's interesting, though? I've thought that, too. I was just in the Bay Area for Super Bowl week, and getting a sense for how John Schneider, Mike McDonald, and the Seattle Seahawks, it came out of nowhere. Right? What were their odds before the season? Like 50-1, 60-1 to win it all. And what I learned is, with John Schneider and Pete Carroll, it was kind of similar to McDermott and Beane. They reported to ownership separately, kind of siloed off. And it got a little awkward. It was great for a while. They won a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Right? Like they had the Legion of Boom. Russell Wilson is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But that period of 3-4 years where they kind of tapered off, what I was told is John Schneider would be talking to ownership, and there'd be all kinds of issues with coaches on the staff and maybe things that Schneider didn't really agree with, but he's kind of protecting Pete Carroll in conversations with ownership.
Yeah, you have to.
He doesn't want to point out things that are wrong on the staff, and I think there's many different ways to skin a cat. Like Ben Johnson in Chicago, he needed that authority to take charge. I mean, Ryan Poles has been disastrous in many ways with how he's built that team. But there is something to having it kind of streamlined, because I think it got to the point where Pete Carroll and John Schneider saw the team very, very differently. There were things that John Schneider would have done to develop players that they weren't able to do because they had some pretty rough coaches on that staff. So maybe it can work. It worked there. He hired Mike McDonald. His fingerprints are all over that Seattle coaching staff and roster, and they won a Super Bowl in their second year.
All right. So will the Buffalo Bills be better with Joe Brady as the head coach?
I think so. I do think that. It doesn't mean they're going to win the Super Bowl. I'd love to just ball up a fist and say, damn it, yes, guaranteed they're going to win a Super Bowl, but they got to build a Jim Leonard defense. They've got to find a weapon at wide receiver. I do think they're absolutely better, though, with Joe Brady as their head coach, because the energy in the building needed to change. The defense needed to change. They needed to become more attacking, more of that disguise, more of that deception. And look, they had, I almost said Davis Mills. They had Davis Webb in an interview, Grant Udzinski. I'm sure that in those interviews, they're talking to the Bills brass and pointing out how predictable this defense was in some pretty key moments, which I'm sure was eye-opening to Terry Pagula and Brandon Beane and everybody sitting in that room. That's going to be better for that moment. They're going to throw something at an offense that they haven't in the past. And I think Josh Allen, you're going to see Josh Allen in full. What does that mean? Does it mean he plays more liberated? Maybe. I think he'll be happier. You could see it written across his face during that press conference. And he had a huge grin on his face. Look, you still need a coach who's going to lay down the law and be a coach. Right. That's what the unknown is with Joe Brady as a younger coach. Is he going to be able to put a foot down when he needs to? We'll see. But I think that Josh Allen needed a coach like Joe Brady who believes in him and knows everything has to funnel through 17.
You think they came close to hiring Dable?
I don't think so.
No?
Early on I thought that they'd go that direction. Look, if it was all about Josh Allen and that relationship, yeah, you absolutely hire Brian Dable. It was like a father figure.
You think
for
they
him.
saw the defense as the Achilles heel for this franchise?
I think that 20-40-1, you can't get past that too. Brian Dable was the head coach with the Giants, these past 4 years, and the problems were much bigger than him with the Giants. Don't get me wrong, but you can't just completely ignore that part of it. And there are a lot of other factors.
All right, so we're running out of time, but I have to get to in 2023. So you write this 3-part, just a scathing journalistic. I guess there's no other way to put it. It was a hit job on Sean McDermott.
I don't know if I'd call it a hit job.
We're gonna bristle.
I don't like that.
Writers always do. So. But it blew my mind when I read it. First of all, I'm totally impressed with your sourcing, because you're not going to quote anonymous sources if you weren't 1,000% sure you had it down pat, right? And that's what I respect about what you do, because first off, it drives me nuts because I see all these, especially YouTube videos or Instagram, and these outrageous, stupid headlines that are completely just a bait click, right? Or clickbait, where just, this is I can't believe this is true. Well, it's not. They just create these goofy headlines, but your stuff is real. You didn't end up in court after writing this. What prompted you to write that 3-part series on McDermott that was, okay, so I'll take away hit piece. It was negative, right? I mean, I don't know how many positive quotes you had that ended up in the piece, but what prompted you to do that?
Right. People do forget Isaiah McKenzie, Tywan Jones, there's Mitchell Trubisky. There's a handful of players in there quoted directly. Had many nice things to say about Sean McDermott, but yeah, I'm not going to hide from the fact that it's 3 parts, whatever the hell it was, 25,000 words that people didn't see coming, to put it gently. What prompted it? I'm trying to think back. So, Go Long wasn't credentialed by the Bills, even though I lived in Western New York. Most teams did credential me.
That's a whole nother story.
That's a whole other story. We don't have the time for it.
Go ahead.
But which is fine. Every team, that's their prerogative. Hell, the Packers, we got a lot of Packer fans who subscribe. The Packers won't credential Go Long when just about everybody else does. But I guess what that kind of did was it forced me, because I told the Bills at the time, it's not going to stop me from doing my job. I've got a lot of readers and a lot of subscribers who are Bills fans that want the real story. They want to know what in the hell is going on behind the curtain. It did kind of force me to find sources in different ways. I did a lot of player profiles with guys, getting wings at Elmo's. I got wings with Damar Hamlin once. I did a story on him, but then everybody wanted to know who Damar Hamlin was, and a lot of folks read that story. Deion Dawkins. I mean, we got pizza in downtown Buffalo. Taiwan Jones, who I did a show with Isaiah McKenzie for 2 years. Quentin Morris. There's a handful of players I did pieces on. And guess what? Phones exist in the 21st century. So I called coaches and scouts. And what kind of led to that 3-part series? I suppose it was 13 seconds. So I did a story on 13 seconds. There's a player who called it a bad situation, and several sources broke down what happened at Arrowhead that game. And it stunned me how the head coach reacted to it. Now, what was on the field was bad enough. You've got, and go back and watch the replay. You'll see Saran, Neal, and players throwing up their arms because they thought it was going to be a squib. They were told it was going to be a squib kick, where I was told Sean McDermott went to Tyler Bass, overruled the special teams coordinator, told him touchback. And then we were told, takes over the defensive play calling, and you got players lining up at another zip code, bada bing, bada boom. Everybody knows what happened. That was bad enough. I was shocked to hear how he reacted after the fact. And I guess the initial sirens go off when you hear a coach at a podium use the word execution. I believe that Sean McDermott cited execution for what went wrong. Now, you've been around football for a long, long time. What's that code for? The players effed up. It wasn't us. It was the players. It was execution. So I'm thinking, okay, that's strange. And then that's when I started talking to people, and you find out how it really went down. Not necessarily player error. And inside the locker room, he tells, one offensive coach said he was actually mad at the offense for scoring too quick, which is kind of bizarre, 13 seconds. And then the next day, to wrap up the season, in so many words, it's quoted in all these stories, but kind of pointed the finger at his staff and said, you guys got to figure out what went wrong here, get away, figure it out, and come back. Took no accountability. And look, if he would have taken accountability in that moment and owned that moment, I think there might have been a way to move on from that game. He did not take accountability. They never really were able to move on. I was shocked.
And he pretty much said he didn't want to even be asked about it from that point on, right?
No.
That was off limits. In the next training camp, nobody wanted to. He didn't want to talk about what happened the year before. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard him discuss it at all.
Never.
Right? So I think that hurt the team, and that kind of stuck with me. So that's 2021. Now 2022 is a weird season. A player basically dies on the field, comes back to life. Sean McDermott's coaching job at the end of that season, unbelievable, masterful. How in the hell do you navigate this unprecedented situation? You give him credit for that. It did end with another playoff loss. And so I just kind of kept talking to people, 2021 to 2022 into 2023. And then everybody always asks, Bob, how could you run this story right then? It's the time. I ran the story then because they were 6-6 on the heels of another brutal loss to Philly in overtime, and it was done. Right? Like, you're going into this huge game against Kansas City, your arch nemesis. And look, if you want to learn what's going on behind the scenes, and it's not always going to be pretty, it's going to be good, the bad, the ugly, we're here.
And it's still up on your site, right?
Oh yeah, it's actually free now. People can check it out.
To go, if you haven't read, to go and read it. And it got national attention, and you got coaches came out in his defense. The organization came out in his defense. And I really thought it actually helped the team. The team kind of rallied around him for the rest of the year. They went on a 6-game winning streak, right?
Right.
Kind of like suddenly, you were the cause for them to suddenly, they needed something to focus on and say, we'll show that he's our guy, right? Whether he was or not, I think it's a team thing. It's a team concept to rally around a teammate or a coach. And then after all that, he invites you to come and have a sit down the next year.
Yeah. So I actually heard from Sean that Friday, I want to say, and got a call through Bill's PR, and it was Sean, and said that he had read the 2 stories that I posted. I said, Sean, there's actually a third one too. I don't know if he ever read that one, honestly. And that was more centered
enough, but go ahead.
On the relationship with Josh Allen. And you know what's wild too, Bob, is I was told from somebody in the organization recently, like, that part of the frustration for the team, you know, when that is published, is there's Sean McDermott, justifiably so, spent so much time worried about the 9/11 anecdote where he told his team to communicate and come together like the hijackers on 9/11, which is absurd.
Unbelievable.
And he owned it. He had owned it. 100 people there that witnessed this. I think there was some frustration that he didn't see the forest from the trees. That maybe the more scathing detail in our series was the stuff about his relationship with Josh. That he'd walk into a meeting room and curse his quarterback for building a house in the off season and say he's got to focus on football. That's got to be Brittany's, his ex-girlfriend at the time. That's got to be her issue, not Josh. That kind of stuff I don't think he ever really realized was more important than the 9/11 stuff. So that's kind of interesting looking back. Maybe he never read part 3.
So when you had a face-to-face.
Yeah, so he said that, and he goes, he wants to get together in the off season. I said, that'd be great. He said that there's a lot that I think you don't know about me, and in fairness, there's a lot I don't know about you. We should sit down, like, get a cup of coffee and get to know each other. I said, Sean, that's a great idea. It was my understanding, like, the doors were closed to go along at One Bills Drive. And we said, look, like, let's get to know each other a little bit. And that's what we did at the NFL Combine that following February. We just kind of sat in the convention center somewhere. Didn't even talk about those stories at all. Got to know each other a little bit. I told him, look, I just want to tell stories. I want to cover this team to the best of my ability. And obviously the best way to do that is to be in the building, talking to you, talking to players, talking to coaches. And I'm going to do it regardless whether the doors are open or closed.
You got a credential after that.
Correct. Yep.
All right. What's Sean McDermott's future?
It's a great question. I think he's taken this year off. I was told that he's going to be choosy. It might have taken him a while in Buffalo, but he realizes the importance of the quarterback position. Look, if his only option is a team like the Cleveland Browns or something like that, and he really wants to coach, I suppose he would take a job like that. But I think he'd love it to be a situation where he's got a proven quarterback that is considered one of the best in the bit. I mean, every coach would want that, right? But I think he really understands that that's what you need to win in pro football. I don't know what that job would be, but I do think, a year away to kind of reset and take a deep breath is probably good for him. You've seen Mike McCarthy do it. Mike Tomlin's doing it now, but he's going to want to coach again, right? It's in his blood. It's all he's known. I do think, though, like, Sean McDermott's best situation would be a team like the Bills in 2017, where you do need discipline. You do need somebody to kind of reset the culture. He's proven he can do that stuff. Is he willing to do all of that again? I don't know. Right? Like, he's on the other side of 50 years old at this point.
Sean McDermott's record, his first year as head coach of the Buffalo Bills, was the exact same record as Rex Ryan the year before, 9-7. But the way the dominoes fell, the Bills were eligible for a playoff spot that year. Rex Ryan didn't even finish the season. If you remember, there was a replacement coach who got interviewed for the head job.
Anthony Lynn.
Yeah. So, but there's no doubt in my mind that Sean McDermott turned things around because number 17 came into the building. That's when things changed. And I've talked about this on this podcast. Greg Cosell from NFL Films, who I really enjoy, not just on GR Radio, but I enjoy his national show, because he basically pointed out a number of times this year, teams shouldn't be worrying about the Buffalo Bills running game. They should be worrying about number 17. He's the best player in the game. Why the Bills keep emphasizing something that he's not? And I knew it. I mean, he didn't call it out so much on local radio because he's playing to the Bills fans. But and maybe it goes back to what you said earlier, that McDermott just didn't kind of get it either. And I think Brian Dable did. I think Dable's like, this guy can do things that nobody else is going to do, so I'm going to let him do it. So, but I'm running out of time. It's great getting you up here. I promise the next time we do it, you don't have to drive all the way up to Buffalo, unless you want a steaming hot plate of spaghetti parm and meatballs, which I can't blame you for that. What's next for Tyler Dunne? What's your next? Can you tell us, give us a hint what your next big story is?
Man, if anybody in that New York Jets organization wants to talk to go along, I'll be here. I'd love to know how this team manages to botch everything year in and year out with coaches, with quarterbacks. It's always ownership, right? But
I'm stunned that Frank Reich jumped on that ship.
I know it. You want a job in the NFL. I get it.
He doesn't need a job. He's making so much money from his previous jobs. But
Yeah.
I mean, Steve Tasker's talked about it. Steve Tasker said he was blown away that Frank decided to jump into, especially with that organization. But Tyler, it's been great having you on. Before I say my final goodbye, let's have one more word from Rich Entertainment.
At Rich Entertainment Group, their mission is simple: bringing friends and families together through unforgettable experiences. From live sports and theater productions to luxury travel and hospitality, they're creating moments that people truly remember. With 19 businesses and growing, Rich Entertainment Group isn't just a group of companies. It's a community built around connection, joy, and shared experiences. It's all about bringing people together. And honestly, that's something we can all use a little more of.
Buffalo Biden baseball coming up in a couple of months. And Tyler, do you do any Bison coverage of any kinds?
I don't really do much I've never been a baseball guy. Never played it, could never appreciate it. I'm sorry.
All right. Well,
Wow, and I'm not really helping your sponsorship here.
who's good? Well, the Biden's giving a great.
Yeah, I got to bring Sonny up. Maybe he'll be a baseball kid.
Is that your son?
Yes, we got 3 kids, Ella, Sonny, and Rocco. So our hands are full down in the southern tier.
Are you Italian?
I am. Yeah, Italian, Irish, and my wife is very Italian. So we had to go with those Italian names.
That's a great name.
My dad told me I was almost a Rocco once upon a time, so it kind of stuck. My wife liked the name, so we went for it. Yeah.
You. Thanks so much for coming out.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's been great having you. Tyler Dunne from Go Long. We want to thank Chef's Famous Italian Restaurant. Tyler's going to walk out of here with a plate of something, I'm sure. And, of course, the Big Weck and Rich Entertainment. We'll be back next week. Our guest next week is Matt Beauvais from WKBW TV, Channel 7. Until then, this is Bob Koshinski saying have yourselves a great night and a much better tomorrow.